Okay. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome again and good day or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Thank you for joining us for another Gimmal education session. My name is Marcia Shields, and I'm from our customer success team. Our goal for these sessions is to enhance your expertise with your Gimmal software. We are recording this and it will be shared after the event. And all of these Gimmal education series recordings are posted on our YouTube site, so you can feel free to go there and check those out. Jeff Tuish is with me today. Jeff is going to be your subject matter expert for Gimmal Discover, which is today's topic. He's going to be continuing on with part 2 of our series about Discover's workflow builder. There will be a part 3 to this series in January, and we'll be sending out those session registrations next week, actually. So keep an eye out for that. Format will be about 15 to 20 minutes for product demonstration, followed by time for your questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to post those in the Q&A section in your Zoom bar, and we will answer them after. Jeff, I think that's it for me. You can take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcia. Okay, so today we'll be talking about, as Marcia said, workflow session number 2. So what we're going to be covering today is some additional steps called a go-to inside of the workflow editor, and also global properties and properties. So go-to. What go-to is it actually is the ability to transfer the control of the flow within a workflow to another location, then when it's done, to come back to where it was. So basically what this does for you is, as it says here, elimination reduces your redundancy, as well as it makes it much easier to maintain the workflow because you won't have that redundancy in there. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. In fact, I have a sample workflow to give you some idea of that. So in the go-to, basically what you're doing is you're making a new tab in the workflow editor. And in there, obviously, you can do decisions and actions. And once again, once that flow is done, it's going to return back to where the go-to was. I also brought up here global properties and properties. What these are, these provide you with the ability to assign values that you use and then reference later within the workflow. So there's 2 types. There's the global properties, which can be set at any level, and you're going to see that there. So for instance, I could set it at the mailbox level and use it at the message level, or we have properties which have to be set and referenced at the same level all the time through. So if I set it in messages, I have to reference it in messages. So it just gives you 2 different ways to assign these variables. And basically what they are, or excuse me, properties, they are variables. So if you've ever done any coding, it's like assigning a value to a variable and then using it later. So I'm going to be showing you how we can go through and do all these things in here. So with that said, I'm going to jump over to the workflow editor. And what I've done is I've taken the liberty of creating a workflow that has a lot of redundancy in it. Here's what the workflow is supposed to do. I want a workflow to look at files that are either 10 years old or older via the modified date, or 5 years or older. When I do, I want to be able to capture what age range that the file is, either 10 or 5 years. And I also want to look for credit card and or social security numbers. So this is the workflow without using go-tos, what I had to do. So first you're seeing the first green box, decision box. Is the file older than 10 years old? If it's true, then the flow goes down. Okay, now I want to check for a credit card. If that's true, I'm going to look for a social security number. If that's true, then I'm going to set the values equal to that I have, and I'll bring it over from the other screen, that my age range is 10 years and it has both a credit card and a social security number within it. However, let's go to the first decision box. If that's false, now I'm doing 5 years. I'm doing the exact same checks I had to do. So now I've duplicated my decision boxes. In fact, I have 2 credit card ones and 3 for social security number. Actually, I might have 4 for social security number, and I do. So now if I ever change my social security number criteria, I've got to come in all 4 places and update that, which is not a convenient thing to do or easy to remember. So what happens here? So on this one, if it is older than 10 years and it does not have a credit card, we're going to look for a social security number and say, if we found one, that we are 10 years, but only with the social security number match. Whereas if we do, yes, I did find a credit card and did not find a social security number, then I'm going to put it at 10 years and only has none because I didn't find it. I'm sorry, this is both for no. I didn't find either. So you're seeing what I'm doing. I'm going through the match types, setting those of 1 of 4 values, both, one or the other, or none. And I'm doing that same thing again at the 5-year level. So this is it's a little convoluted, but this is the decision boxes that I had to make. So for you coders who ever done this, we're basically doing an if statement and an else, but we don't give you an end if, meaning that once the flow goes somewhere, you can't bring it back to where it was. But that's what the go-tos are for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go out here. I'm going to open up the new workflow that does have go-tos. So what you're going to see here in the File tab is the first thing I'm doing. I'm setting an age range property equal to none. And it's pretty simple. I said, what's the name of the property? This is where I actually initiate it or initialize it, set it to an initial value. And I'm going to say it's none because I want to be able to have something in the report instead of an empty value if I don't have an age range. The same goes true for matches. I'm setting that equal to none. But then I have the pink box, and the pink box is the go-to. So the first thing I want to do is I want to determine if I want to process this file, because remember, I only want files greater than 10 years old or greater than 5 years old. So here I have one that says, are you more than 10 years old? And I'll bring that decision box over. You'll see we're using the modified date. And if so, I'm setting the property equal to of age range equal to 10 years. Or if it's greater than 5 years old, I'm setting the property to 5 years. So once this finishes, the flow comes back to the next box under the go-to. So I'm asking here, did I find a 5 or 10 year age range? If I didn't, I don't want to do anything with that file. If I did, now I want to go to the credit card and look and see, hey, did I find a credit card? If I did, I'm going to set the matches variable to CC. And then I'm going to come back and say, okay, now let's go to social security number. Did I find a social security number? Yes, I did. But remember now, I could already have a value of CC inside of the matches variable or the property because I found a credit card on it. So I'm checking it. Does it have a CC value? If it does, I'm going to set the matches to both CC and SSN. Pardon me. If it doesn't, then I'm only going to set the matches equal to SSN. So what I've done here is I've used the 3 go-tos and substantially decreased. Actually, I eliminated all of my redundancy that I had. And now I only have one place to change. If I have a credit card change for criteria, instead of having 2 boxes, I have 1. For social security number, instead of having 4, I have 1. So use these go-tos to your advantage to be able to look at your data and say, oh my gosh, you know what? I need to make this, or not your data, your code, sorry, to make sure that I am reducing my redundancy and make this easier to maintain for the next person and or even for myself when I come back in later to be able to look at it. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint presentation. And next we're going to go into subtokens. So what are subtokens? Subtokens are a way for you to manipulate the data typically within a report. So what that allows you to do is to do any kind of function against a text, numeric, date value, and be able to do something with it. So we see here you have the 3 different options: manipulation, formatting, and options. Here are the subtokens. So I'm going to give you 3 screenshots here. And these are all the subtokens you always have available to you. So you're going to see some here, like this is one of the ones I'll be showing you, age and days. I want to convert a date. I have a date in history. I want to know how many days ago that was, or minutes, or hours, or seconds. Or I want to go out and I want to look at a particular, maybe a value contains something. So a textual value of having a particular thing. Or in the after, I want to look at all the characters after a particular character. That's what these subtokens do. And here's the rest of them. So we have all of these ones through here. And I have some examples that I want to show you to give you an idea of how these things work. So these are all them in alphabetical order here. And you're going to see us once again being able to use some of these. So what I've done is I actually created some examples. And when you're using subtokens, which we're going to go back to the workflow and I'll show you how to do this. But when you're using subtokens, it actually gives you a chance to test what you're doing. So in this case, I say, I want to take the file name only token and I want to convert it to uppercase. So if this was the value within there, now you see the value that was done because of to upper. Same thing with this. If I want to take the file name and only get the left 3 characters of it, notice instead of having this full text, I just get the first 3 characters, THI. If I go to file name only and I want to do before the period, before the extension, notice instead of invoice.docx, now I just have invoice. So these subtokens are very powerful. So these are some that you can use for textual values. And then say we wanted to do things for numeric values. Now, what I've showed you, I actually doubled one up here. So I said, I want to look at the modified date of a file. I want to convert that value to an age in days, but I only want to do this without any decimal points. So for a particular day when I did this, it was 337 days ago based upon this date value. So you can put any date value in here and it's going to calculate what that value represents. Go over here to file size. These two are probably the ones I use the most, but file size to file size string. What that's saying is in Discover, when we give you the size of a file, the size of a message, what have you, it's going to be in bytes. So unless you want to get your calculator out and start dividing by 1024 until you get less than 1024, then I would suggest you use this to size string. And what it will do is it will represent this value based upon the units and the value that we had here. So it really makes it nice and gives you the ability to format these in a much more digestive method than just having the raw number sitting out there. There is one other step besides goto that I wanted to talk about just to mention, and it's called loop. And what this does for you, I've never actually had a reason to use this in production. I've tested it, but in essence, it's like a do while, basically saying, I'm going to keep calling this goto until a particular condition has been met. So you can use that to your advantage. Maybe you're incrementing something by 1 over and over and over again. You could certainly do that. But I've never had a reason to use this, not saying it's not valuable. I just haven't had a chance that a workflow that was that complex to have to do that. So let's go back over now, and we're going to go look at how I did some of this. So I'm going to open up the set values, and we're going to look at the subtokens. And you're going to notice one of the things I did here is saying that I want to use the file size to size string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill that line, and we're going to make a brand new column, and I'm also going to call this size. And we're going to click on tokens and bring this over to this screen. And I'm going to select file size. Notice subtokens down here in the bottom left. Before I click OK, I'm going to click on subtokens. Now I'm going to say, okay, what subtoken do you want to use? And it's going to bring this up. Let me make this bigger so you can see them all. And I'm going to go down to the bottom and choose to size string. Notice that it's going to tell you what type of data it's expecting, what type of data it returns. And if I get this over to the right a little bit more, this is a nice description, gives you a good idea of what it will do for you. So I'm going to click on to size string, but look what it does now. It's saying, okay, put your number in. Okie dokie. I'm going to put this number in. Look what happens as I add or subtract number. Here we're at 507 gig. Now we're at 50 gig. Now we're at 5 gig. Now we're at 520 because I'm reducing what this value is here, and it's adjusting accordingly. So it's a great way of being able to do that. So let's show you a different example. I'm going to go ahead and choose days here. And I'm going to say, I want to get the number of days on a particular date. So let's go out and let's use file modify. I'm going to click on subtokens. Once again, here's my token expression, my example. I'm going to click on subtokens and say age in days. It's going to say, great, here's the age in days. Look what happened. I'm going to go ahead and choose this to be 0, 1. So we got a value, but look at all the decimal places we get. So this is where I said, you know what? I don't want all those. Can you please do something different for me? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose format. And in format, now I can go in and I'm going to put pound, 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 comma, pound, pound, 0. And look what it did for me. Now it rounded this value. Because basically what I'm saying is I want to go to the 100,000s here. And any value, these pound signs are saying suppress the number if it's 0 leading, but otherwise give me the value. So 335 is the pound, pound, 0. If I had gone into the thousands, so if I had gone and down and made this 2021, now I'm getting the comma with the 1,000. So this is what you can do with these subtokens. That's a lot of power in here. So once again, you can use any of these tokens you have and be able to interrogate the data and then further go along and say, okay, what sub token do I want to use? So once again, let's go through some of these that are out there. So I can go out, what's the length of a value that I have out there? There's the format. Maybe I want to go out and divide it by a number. I could do that. Or I want to append something to the end of it. Here's the before that we looked at with the period on the extension. So a lot of values that you can use out here. It gives you a lot of power to be able to manipulate this data in any way that you want. In fact, let me show you this because I was remiss in showing you this before. This is the property. Remember we talked about, in fact, I'll go back in since I didn't cover this when we were doing the properties. Remember I set this age range to 10 or 5 years? I also went through and said, what kind of match do I have? Credit card or social? I'm going to go back into the set values now, and I'm going to say, okay, my value, if I click the plus sign, I can go out and look at the token for prop. So this is my property token. And now I can go through and say, oh, I want to put in the name of my property. And if I did age range, that's how I got this. So it allows me to take the value that I assigned in one of these other sections or tabs and be able to then report on that value. So that's the variable we're setting, is taking this variable value here, assigning it with the set property like we're having here, and then being able to manipulate that based upon the values that I wanted to represent as I produce the report. So for every file I have, I'm going to have this metadata in addition to converting the size to a string value, so that proper units, and then the age range and match types as well. So that's how you can take advantage of the go-tos, the global and regular properties, as well as the subtokens, to be able to take this data and manipulate it, use it however you want, so that from a go-to perspective, you can minimize your redundancy or eliminate it. And then for the subtokens, be able to leverage those to be able to format your data in the way that you want. Okay, back to the PowerPoint we go.
Sounds good,
There
Jeff.
we are.
Great
And
information.
that is
Yeah.
the end of my presentation.
Okay, we do have just a couple questions for you from the
Okay.
crowd. One, I believe the answer is yes, but the question is, can you use multiple subtokens at once?
Absolutely. Now, I've only ever used 2 on top of a token, and that was typically like I showed you with the age and days, to be able to get the value and then to format it. I'm sure that if you wanted to do something else, you're basically just nesting all those subtokens together to get what your final result wants to be. But yes, you can certainly use more than one at a time.
Okay, great. Another question we have is, when do you recommend using a go-to step?
Well, if you notice that you are going to have the same decision box based upon the branching that you have from other decision boxes, that is the time, because that's the main reason, is when you have decisions upon decisions. And once again, there's no end if to that. So you can't go back to where you were. The branch is going to keep continuing. That's where the go-to comes into play, that you can have the multiple go-tos, and you can have more than one go-to off the branches. So if I had a decision box with 5 different decisions and I all wanted them to do the same thing, I can reference that same go-to, and then the flow will come back to the branch that I was in prior to the go-to being called.
Okay. And one more last question, unless anybody else has anything else to pose, but what subtoken have you used the most?
Well, I would say my most widely used one is that 2 size string, because most times I like to include the size of the item when I'm in the report, and I don't want to get my calculator out and start dividing by 1024. So that is the one that I use definitely the most often. But I have leveraged the left, the right, the behind, the before, the after, the length. I've used a lot of those different subtokens for things that I've had to do for clients.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions, Jeff. If you could put up the last slide. Yes, wonderful. Well, thanks, everybody. That's a wrap for today. We hope you enjoyed the session. Again, we'll be sending out the recording for it, and it'll also be posted on Gimmal's YouTube channel. Here is the upcoming sessions for 2025. We'll be kicking off the new year There are two in particular laid out for Gimmal Discover I wanted to point out. The final and part 3 of the Workflow Builder will be January 16th, so we hope you can join us for that. As always, if you have any suggestions for future sessions, please do email those to me at marcia.shields@gimmal.com. We'll be happy to add them to our list of events. If we don't talk to you for the rest of the New Year's, thank you for joining us again. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you real soon. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Stay safe.